All right, guys, welcome to HARDCOURT, the tennis podcast, where we will be covering all the topics that nobody actually wants to talk about or wants to hear about, and all the fun stuff in between. I am your host, Will. With me, I have
Joel Castillo,
Peter Heckler.
Yep. And today we're going to be talking about, is there actually a right way to play tennis? And when we talk about what it means to be a tennis player, tennis is a very individual sport. So when we're talking about this, all we're really talking about is essentially the way we would interpret what it is to be a right tennis player. So again, free form, no rules. This is the first one. We're going to make it better as we go along. But let's get right into it. So Peter, based in your opinion, is there actually a right way to play tennis?
I think that there is certainly a better way to compete. I think, as you said, it's an individual expression of how you choose to play the game, but whether it's how you compete or how you train, there is a best practices sort of way to go about it in terms of the intensity and focus you bring to how you try to succeed at tennis. I mean, I think that's true in almost any sport, but particularly in tennis because it's an individual sport.
Yeah, like you're doing everything pretty much on your own. There's not really anybody that can do it for you.
And certainly as it relates to competition, you don't have your coach out there on the court telling you to do this or do that, how to change what you're doing, how to read. Is the strategy I'm employing succeeding or not? Do I have the right strategy, but I'm just not executing the strategy properly? And I mean, those are the reasons that, I mean, so many parents want their children to play tennis because of that individual problem-solving ethos. I mean, you have to figure it out on your own. And so many of the things that you learn in tennis, even, at a fairly low competitive level, say in high school tennis, not to the upper echelons of tournament tennis, but competing in high school tennis, that problem solving, those are skills you take with you later in life.
That's true. I mean, to kind of piggyback off what you said, coaches aren't supposed to help you when you're on the court. We've all kind of been to those tournaments where you got that coach that's sitting right up against the window or right up against the screen or
like coach or parent.
Yeah, the coach parent, the traveling coach that's acting like they're not coaching.
Yes.
So you're not supposed to be helping them, but some people have even become like reliant on not being able to perform if they're not supported from the outside. I've definitely, as a player, I've seen those kids that if there wasn't somebody helping them pretty much the whole way, they couldn't play their way out of the paper bag, even if they hit the ball well. So towards what you're saying, yeah, it definitely creates a more individual or more independent type of person if you're able to facilitate those skills as a coach. So if you're a coach or a parent coach, being able to help your student or son or daughter kind of figure out how to help themselves rather than, giving them all the answers every time they play. Because we all have personal experience with a few students that are unable to make those changes unless somebody's like right next to them the whole time. But we won't say any names, but actually there's a player who's no longer here where they just weren't able to figure out those things unless somebody was telling them how to make those adjustments like in real time.
Well, and that is the difference in part between being a good hitter and a good player.
What do we call those people? Overcoached?
Overcoached, or I mean, we would call them academy kids.
Yeah, the ball machine kid.
They hit, it looks beautiful, it's perfect, as long as that's the ball they're getting to hit off of. The moment the ball gets heavy or it's sliced or there's wind or there are any variables thrown into that equation, as you said, they can't hit their way out of a paper bag.
It's sad too, because I've seen some really physically gifted kids that just mentally couldn't figure out how to beat somebody half their skill level. I mean, but that, I mean, I'll let Joel speak first, but that reminds me of like the second part of this that I wanted to mention when we say, is there actually a right way to play? So what do you think? Is there actually a right way to play?
Yeah, there's many ways. There's many ways to play. Honestly, you gotta think of it this way. I can hit a perfect forehand, hit a ball down the line, win a point, or I can be that scrub that just shanks balls all the time, but ball happens to go in.
We've met those people.
But it's just out of habit. It's just out of habit. There's a lot of us that have bad habits, you know. But it works. It works in the end. I'm looking at it in this situation like older people. They've been playing for years. They've been playing for 20 plus years, 10 plus, 30 plus years, and they do these things that we even look at them and we're like, man, how do you make that? How do you make that? But it works.
Yeah,
and they win points.
Like sometimes people think I'm being like sarcastic, but I'm like, wow, how did you make that?
Yes, there's just some shots. Yes, there's just some shots like it's just so unorthodox, but it works. It works for them.
Oh, dude, every class we teach, there's at least one person. Like somebody I was teaching today did it like 12 times. But sorry, go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, so like I'm with you on that. Like, you know, there's different levels. There's, you know, competitive, and like, you know, if you're training, there's right ways in that aspect. But I actually think, you know, there is no right or wrong way.
I didn't say there's no wrong way. I said is there a right way?
Oh yeah. So, but I'm just saying, like, I believe, like, I don't think there's a necessarily a right.
I think the right way to play
relative
is you have to, as an individual, identify what your skill set is, what your strengths and weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. And then you have to tailor your strategy to what is going to best highlight your strengths and hide your weaknesses.
Right.
And you have to be able to learn to adapt that to different opponent playing styles and figure out how to make it work so that you can win matches. In terms of competition, and everybody goes about that, you know, I might be somebody who still serves and volleys on the second serve and chips and charges. You know, Joel might sit back and, you know,
as hard as he can.
You might hit head. I mean, everybody's got their own. I mean, you have defensive players, you have counterpunchers, you have aggressive players, but you have to know as an individual what those strengths are and how to make those work within any individual match situation.
Right.
So that there has to be a plan going into whatever level of competition you're in. Now, you can always diverge from a plan and change it, but you should always go in to be a successful competitor to compete the right way. There should always be a game plan.
Right. I mean, but that's kind of the thing that I was going to mention when Joel was talking, is like, if you're thinking about like what the right way or the wrong way is, we have students personally that we coach to be high school players, high level junior players, preferably like having college aspirations, but we'll see them get torn apart by the unorthodox kid. Like, they'll beat the normal hitter, but then they'll come up with that person that, you know, chip, charge, poke, you know, drop shot, lob, two-handed forehand, and we'll see them just get demolished by that person that just didn't come to the game with the standardized way of playing. I mean, like, to take Joel's example, we have the recreational older players that are here. I guarantee that some of the kids that we have that actually hit the ball well would struggle to play against just that random play style where you can't really anticipate the standardized tactics. So like when we teach kids, it's, you know, rallying cross, looking for a chance to go down the line, and, you know, on a short ball, move in, approach down the line, volley cross court, whatever the tactics are. But then you've got these people that are out here playing, and, you know, the first ball is a short ball that barely clears the service line. The next ball, they're crushing it down the line. And then the third ball is a dink that just because they're like, oh, there's nothing I can do. But then you have our kids that I 100% can say that those kids would really struggle to play against those guys. So then but then conversely, we end up with like the parents who come back to us and are like, how did my son, how did my daughter lose? They should have definitely destroyed that kid. That kid sucked. That kid couldn't even hit the ball right. And then they come home with that 6-2, 6-2 loss to that type of player.
Well, I mean, certainly the three of us as former players, and you mentioned this earlier about how like playing the pusher, who got the ball you did constantly. Joel said this, constantly got the ball back in play and just neutralized all the pace, and it looked ugly.
Yeah.
And as a player, especially if you're a junior and you're sort of not fully formed brain, you're saying to yourself, my strokes are better, I should be winning this match. And you make it almost harder on yourself because you set yourself up for failure because you're playing the person on the other side rather than the ball coming back at you. And one of the things in terms of playing the right way or competing successfully is, I mean, I hate to use Brad Gilbert's winning ugly, but you have to be able to know how to win ugly. You're only as good as your worst day.
True.
If you can win when you're not playing well or conditions aren't perfect, and again, it has to do with adaptation. Like, how quickly, if you were the clean, correctly coached player and you're playing somebody who does things in a very unorthodox fashion, how quickly can you recognize it and adapt to that? In the same way that if you're making certain mistakes, how quickly can you recognize what those mistakes are and change those so that they're not occurring anymore? And the best players, the amount of time duration between making that recognition and fixing it is much smaller than people who aren't as good. I mean, they might spend an entire set not realizing what's going on, either technically or strategically.
And a lot of players that are better, it could take as much as or as low as a game or even a few points. Like I as a player have lost to people that I knew I hit better than, but the matchup was bad. And people would come to me and say like, how'd you lose to that person? And sometimes it's more so what they do well, you don't handle well, even if you're the better player. An example would be, even though I know I'm better than this player, you know who beats me, who has a very high winning record against me? Nolan. Nolan beats me because Nolan's strength is serving. My weakness has always been returning. Even though I'm not a bad returner, when I come up against his serve, because he's so unorthodox with it, like he hits it really quick. Yeah. Like
his toss is super low.
Yeah, he tosses it low, and before you have a chance to even read the toss, the ball's already on your side of the net. Because
it's the Roscoe Tanner serve.
Yeah. Right.
Take it on the rise.
But he doesn't serve it slow, but I've returned faster serves. It's the fact that I don't get a chance to look at it, and he's very accurate with the spots that he hits. So I always struggle to play him just because of he's pretty much guaranteed to hold serve almost all the time, and he's a serve and volleyer. So when I do get a hold of the few balls that I do, he's cleaning up very quickly, and then he wants to get to the net on returns as well. So what he does is, and he's one of the most like versatile players I've ever seen in terms of like what he can do with his hands. But like I'll hit bomb serves at him, and he'll just stand 2 feet inside the baseline and just slap.
I can't tell you how many balls I drop to his feet and he just picks them right up. Dude, he is such a great baller, honestly.
It's so annoying, but the thing is, like, I know the shots I'm hitting aren't bad. He's just a terrible matchup for me.
Well, I mean, too, though, I think, like, for you, I mean, as you've described yourself as a player, like Nolan's problematic for you because he doesn't allow you any rhythm. Like, it's not even that the shots that he hits, if he did them repetitively, you could get a rhythm off them, but there's no repetition there.
Yeah, serve. Finally get a return, volley.
But points against him or a player of that nature, you're either winning or losing the point so quickly that even for you to hit your way into the match in the beginning, you just don't get. I mean, that was one of the reasons that Sampras was so successful, was because you couldn't get into a rhythm with him.
Yeah, and that's why people liked watching Agassi versus Sampras so much, is because like he was one of the few people that could like somewhat neutralize the serve and force Sampras to play.
Right.
So like you were constantly looking at a battle between somebody who was a really clean ball striker and somebody who was a really clean volleyer. But I mean, to get back to the is there a right way to play? Let's look at it a different way, and I'll ask Joel first. Is like think about even at the professional level, because people are trained differently. You're trained athletically, but you're trained differently. Think about the big three. They're completely different players.
Yeah, completely different strokes.
Mm-hmm.
But
technical, tactical, physical, like all of their skill sets are up to a certain standard, but they diverge so drastically at the like final product. Like you take somebody like Rafa, who's heavy, 10, 20 feet behind the baseline sometimes, unbeatable on clay. Novak, who's probably the best defender. Fed, who's got like the most versatility, the most all-court awareness and ability.
All around, just a better.
Yeah, so like
player.
If you were to look at like those type of players, let's not even look at like the bottom of the barrel, ugly chipper that just keeps it in play. But like let's look at it from a higher standpoint now. Like if you had those type of players, is there a right way to play?
No, well, so I'm looking at it like look at Rafa's stroke and then look at Fed's stroke. Fed's stroke is so much cleaner. It looks like he's attached a little more. Rafa, he's a little bit. It seems like he's just a little bit bigger, and his swing's so much more aggressive, so much bigger. He whips it around his head. But in the end, there are many things that are super important that must happen within that stroke, and that's what they all do exactly the same thing. They lead with that butt cap and then that contact point. Like there's so many things that they all do, but they do things so much different. But there's those points that you have to really focus on. But like I said, like Rafa's so clean. Rafa's so like all over the place. He buggy whips the racket. Fed's so clean. Like, but they hit the same. They can hit the same ball. They can hit the same ball. So there's many ways to. I always look at it. There's many ways to skin a cat. So I don't think there's a wrong way or a right way or something like that.
But one of the things that, as it relates to, again, right is sort of a catch-all phrase in terms of, or it's subjective in terms of what you think is right. But look at how many different times that Rafa has changed things about his game, where he returns from, his service motion.
Didn't he used to be a platform server at one point as well? Like he's definitely changed his serve.
He changed how high his toss was, flattening it out, whether he was spinning it in. But he's actually one of the best volleyers on tour, which you wouldn't think of for somebody who's a clay court. Like he closes the net. You see pictures of McEnroe back in the day and how quickly McEnroe got from point A to point B and how tight he was for the volley. Rafa does the same thing. He does it almost certainly better than Djokovic and maybe better than Fed. But look at Djokovic. At one point in time in Djokovic's career, he had that huge hitch in the serve.
Oh yeah.
And it was a completely limiting factor. Like he couldn't go beyond that. So he went back and addressed that. Whereas Fed
I think Fed's just kind of evolved with his body.
But Fed was always very reluctant to, especially in his matches against Rafa working that topspin over up into the backhand of Fed. And Fed, for a long time, refused to, like, slice it.
Yeah.
He would insist on trying to come over that ball.
Slicing his shoulder after his match.
And I mean, it unfortunately, but it was sort of that tin cup mentality where I want to hit the shot I want to hit, whether it's effective or not. So I mean, in that regard, at that level, I would say that was not the right way.
Right. That's not the right way to play.
Or to compete, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, I actually got in an argument with one of my college teammates. He said that Rafa was one of the best volleyers on tour. I actually disagree. I'm not saying he's a bad volleyer because, I mean, obviously he's a professional player. You need a certain quality of skill set. I say, you can tell me if you agree, I say he's one of the best approachers on tour. Because, like, I equate having Rafa's approach shot to having Isner as a doubles partner serving. Like, the quality of ball that he's coming in behind and his ability to wrong foot people so well makes it so that, and I'm not saying he has bad volleys, but I'm saying it makes his a good or a great volley almost not even necessary. Like, and again, I've seen him hit some stunners of volleys, like in Laver Cup and stuff like that, where the shots are really impressive. But in the realm of the singles court, the shots that he's coming in behind, like, I'd rather have his approach shot than Fed's. Like, because of two things. Rafa's really good at pinning you to one corner and making you wish you could come out of that corner. Like, he'll hit 3 or 4 or 5 inside-out forehands to the point where you're wishing he would go down the line. And then when he finally goes down the line, you've, like, sat yourself into the other corner. And then he'll still come in behind it. So, like, by the time he does that, like, his cleanup is so easy. Whereas like, somebody like Fed, because he's more of a conventional approacher, the first short ball he gets, he'll come down the line, and just his court coverage is really, really good. And I'd say his volleys are very clean, but his volleys are more conventional. Whereas, like, when you come in behind Rafa's level of approach shot, he's usually dealing with, like, floats for passing shots because the person's had to stretch their arms so far out.
Right. No, I mean, I agree with that. And I think, I mean, it's interesting now that, I mean, as part of the evolution formula, you know, we talk about the whole teaching the net part of the equation as transition. Yeah. So it's not just the volley in of itself, it's the short ball into the net that is going to be the determining factor. I mean, and for so many of the kids, I mean, the playing style is certainly not what, you know, like I grew up with back in the 80s, where, I mean, like, we literally chipped and charged, and we'd serve volley off second serves. But today, I mean, the biggest thing, you know, at least for the juniors, and the reason why being confident in the volleys is so important to their ability to play well, to compete the right way, is that the more confident they are in their volleys, the better their mid-court game is. And we have a lot of kids who are reluctant to move up and be aggressive with that mid-court ball and almost hit and retreat because they're afraid of what happens next, that I have to go to the net behind that, what?
They're hitting balls from like a foot inside the service line and they're running back to the baseline.
Yeah. So I definitely agree with that. I think a lot of our players, they're not as confident. I think that's what's going on with a lot of players nowadays. They don't have a lot of confidence in their volleys. I know me, you know, growing up, you know, when I was training, I don't think we worked on the volley enough. I think we were so stuck on being pinned to the baseline and working on like baseline and grinding from the baseline too much, and that transitioning step approaching, getting yourself into the net. I think that lacked a little bit, and like just from my point of view of when I was growing up and training and stuff like that. I think we lacked a lot on that.
My question would be like, do you feel like with Peter's era excluded because it was slower,
Mm-hmm.
the game's gotten so much faster that people are more and more reluctant to go forward or even practice it? Like, I feel like I see coaches put their players at the net and practice volleys, and I see them put them players at the baseline and practice baseline. I feel like the mid-court is the most under-practiced area.
Well, and that's where the most movement occurs.
Exactly, and that's where you miss most. Like,
And all of, I mean, any reasonably talented player can hit a decent technical stationary volley. It's timing the movement splitting early enough. Everyone overruns where they should be splitting,
Oh, yeah.
and then they're moving laterally or horizontally for the volley rather than splitting earlier, picking up the ball and accelerating to the volley. A lot of our players wait, or players these days wait for the ball to come, volley, and then they move forward, rather than getting the movement forward to the volley and splitting and hitting.
Well, they tend to have cement feet. They don't move. Their feet are just stuck to the ground there,
Yeah,
and then they
it is.
reach.
It's so bad for some of these kids though, and then even the adults. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I give the adults more of a pass though, because some of them have like mobility issues. But
Yeah.
like for the kids, it's like I end up like I remember there's a couple drills that I do with the kids where I'm sitting there with like my racket, like poking them in the back. I'm like, move, move.
But I mean, it's funny because, with, and again, I think a lot of what we're talking about is geared towards juniors or juniors with the potential to be better. When you tell those kids, we want you to attack or be more aggressive, the light bulb in their head goes off, and that says to them, swing harder. And the idea that the first place you start attacking from is your feet. And that whole, your whole thing will about, whether you're covering ground on a defensive situation or you're creating space on an offensive situation, it's that intensity of footwork in the creation of space in an offensive situation for that ball sitting up in the middle of the court that doesn't quite click with the kids as much as we would want it to.
Oh yeah, definitely, dude. Like, and the thing is, I have fun with it at the same time. Like, I'm always trying to figure a fun way to get the kids to like rationalize the way I want them to move, rather than them kind of going through, the steps that we're trying to make them move. Because the problem that we have a lot of the times is like the kids are reluctant to do it wrong, so they'd rather do it wrong by not messing it up than by doing it and messing it up, if that makes sense. So like, if I don't go to the wrong spot, Coach Will won't be as mad, but you're still in the wrong spot. So like the kids will stop on the service line and start like half volleying and taking balls out of the air because we've told them how they're supposed to cover the net, but since they kind of second guess where they need to be, they never went to the area where they were going to mess that up, if that makes sense.
Right. I mean, and as that relates to the original thing about is there a right way to play, I think, in any sport, I mean, and in life in general, the way we learn is by making mistakes. And hopefully you don't make the same, you learn from your mistakes, you don't keep making the same mistake over and over again, but you're not afraid to make a mistake. And I think a lot of the mentality of the kids out there right now is that they're reluctant to make that mistake. And for me, I don't mind seeing a kid do the wrong thing if he is accountable for that and can justify why he did it. If he says to me, Peter, hey, I hit that approach shot cross court because I thought I could stretch my opponent. I mean, there was a reason for what he did. But I mean, and even, it's hard because, the kids see, or players in general, we see a ball that's really far away from us. And the first thing you want to do is, the first thing you're concerned with is getting the ball. And that's where you'll see it the most often. I mean, or with better players. Well, I was just trying to get my racket on it. Well, great, you got your racket on it, but you didn't have a plan for doing anything with it. Like, always have and back to what I said earlier, when you're playing, always have a plan.
Right.
And if you don't get to the ball, you don't get to the ball. You look at your opponent and you hold up your hand and you go, nice shot, well done.
I laugh about that. I'm going to come back to that one really quick, but I'll mention that first. I was talking to one of my students. This was months ago, and I was kind of talking to her about the word intent or just intention. And what I mentioned to her was, if I come to watch you play, and you're smacking winners left and right, in my eyes, as your coach sitting behind you, just in the stands, I'm going to go and say, great shot. Yep, that looked good. Great shot. Looks like you're playing well. But what I mentioned to her was like, only you know that you were aiming the complete opposite end of the court, and it just happened to be a winner this way. So, like, let's say you're trying to hit a serve out wide and you hit an ace down the tee. The people in the back are going to go, great serve, clap it up, and be like, that's really impressive. But in your head, you're supposed to be like, damn, that was like 16 feet off of where I was aiming. And a lot of people will sit there and take credit for serving well because they were just trying to get the serve in, but they don't realize why their windows of serving well are so few and far between, because they are just trying to serve. There's not an intent behind, aiming down the tee, aiming across, aiming out wide, setting a slice serve or a kick serve or a flat serve. So when they're serving well, they'll come to you and say they're serving well, but then they don't know how to replicate it because they're just basically chasing the ball. They're not really chasing the intent behind the ball. But what I wanted to ask was, because you mentioned the fact that they don't want to be wrong, do you feel like that's a byproduct of tennis being such a spotlight sport, where the only way the point ends usually is by somebody doing something really impressive or by somebody else doing something wrong? Yeah. So like in basketball, for example, if you shoot and you miss, yeah, everybody's going to notice that you missed, but we forget really quickly because somebody grabs the rebound and then the point is still going. Yeah. But like with tennis, the second you miss, everything stops. So as a 12, 13-year-old player in a clinic, or a 12, 13-year-old player playing a match, you're so reluctant to do the thing that you don't have confidence in because everybody's going to see you mess it up.
Yeah, so this sport's very judgy. Let's just say that. Yeah. So even, I'm not saying like judgy far as like parents and fans or spectators or whatever.
Maybe it is.
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah. But this sport's gonna tell you when you're not playing so hot, when you're looking like trash, when you're feeling like trash. Like I was explaining
the first video I posted of me playing you.
Oh man, ooh,
you won 6 points total.
That is not good. It was terrible. I think I played I didn't play for like 2-3 weeks. I hopped back on the court. I was like, "Oof, I'm ready for this." And then I was like, "Can't keep the ball in the court."
I was playing fairly well, but you definitely made me look way better than I was.
No, you were playing well, and I think lately you've been playing super well. I think your serve's been catching up a little bit. Yeah. I was lacking a little bit.
For those of you that don't know, I'm planning to rejoin the tour, so I've been practicing a lot harder. So there's not that many people that I can actually kind of really cut loose against, but Joel's one of them. So had to hand them the smoke a little bit.
Just a little bit, but I'm all right now.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of what you asked about, are the kids afraid of failure and that it's tough in tennis? I think, especially for those that are competing, it's hard because we're not able to go and watch a lot of the matches.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, and certainly the high-level matches where they're going, some of the kids who are going to, level 2s, level 1s, so we receive especially with the younger ones, we receive the input through the lens of their parents.
Which is never.
Which, I mean, even with some parents who've played tennis, it's hard, and I know with my children in different sports, I can be really hard as somebody who is a coach.
Yeah.
With my inclination is to want to immediately tell them what they did wrong, not be the parent and wear the parent hat and say, I'm sorry you lost, and just let it sit and then go back and say to the coach what happened. But I think a lot of times, to what you say about the success-failure window, in a good rally, they may hit 10 really nice forehands. They miss the 11th one, and just as humans, we remember that one negative thing more than we do all the positive things that went up to it. So I mean, that's one of they're constantly getting that feedback.
Yeah, and that's what I meant when I said,
where they can't remember what they did well, they only hear what they did poorly.
Right, and I mean, with some of our students, that's the thing I try to really drive home, because sometimes in certain cases, I feel like we have to be the parent because the parent's trying to be the coach. And I feel like every player needs a cheerleading section as well. Like, we want to, get the result that we want out of them, but if you've got a parent, you've got another parent, you've got a coach, you've got a high school coach, you've got a practice partner, and everybody's telling you how you're messing it up, and nobody's actually saying, yeah, you messed it up, but you just ripped like 12 before you missed that 13th one. Like, the kids will implicitly judge themselves negatively because they only see the end, which is what I was saying about tennis kind of being a spotlight sport, where it's always going to be just you, unless you're obviously playing doubles, but even then the spotlight's still primarily on how the point ends. Yeah. And then with it being just you have to kind of absorb all the negatives and the positives, but I feel like we as humans immediately go to where the negative is, because most tennis matches are not going to end with a positive winner ratio to forced or unforced errors.
I mean, unless you're in the top
and even
30 in the world.
And even then, it'll be primarily forced errors, but the error count will usually be way higher.
And one of the reasons the winner count goes higher is because of people cracking first serve winners. That goes into it. But I mean, I remember a number of years ago, a student of mine who ended up, he played 3 for Princeton, #1 doubles, was a good player. We were down at Everett at Clay's in the 14 and unders. And I was with his father, and he lost to the 7th seed in the 3rd round, 3 sets. It was a tough match. His father was absolutely vitriolic about the loss. Absolutely furious. And we're sitting there at dinner, and he's pounding his fist and telling the player everything he did wrong. And I looked at him and I said, listen, if you want to do my job, I'm not necessary. I will change my flight and I will fly home tomorrow morning. I said, if you want to let me do my job, then let me do my job.
And sometimes that's what parents need to hear, and I feel like a lot of parents don't know how to separate those two. Or I feel like they give everything to the coach. I feel like there needs to be a balance. Like, there are parents who try to be the coach and the parent, and there are coaches who are given the job of being the parent and the coach.
Right. And we all have seen or experienced, the parent who's trying to live vicariously through the exploits of the kid.
Oh, yeah.
And, so many, it's almost like a catchphrase, like the tennis parent. You can apply it to any, it's a helicopter parent, but, it's also hard as, you guys don't have children yet, but you want your child to be successful so badly that sometimes it's hard to lose, or sometimes you lose sight of the fact that it's okay for them just to lose, because you want it for them so badly. But it's knowing as a parent when to step away and being able to have a dialogue with a parent and a student, a child that you're working with a lot. I mean, you spend a lot of time with these kids and you develop a very close relationship with them and their family. And it's being able to have that dialogue to say, listen, Jim, you know, you need to be able to back off a little bit.
Yeah.
And they need to be able to hear you in you saying that.
Yeah, and there's definitely kids that we coach where there's parents that are way over the line to the point where you almost feel like you have to do the parenting job.
And I don't even think they notice it. I feel like they really don't, some of them. But I've just had the experience of, you know, as a coach and as a player, dealing with like parents like that. I've played with some phenomenal females that their parents were just, you know, drilling in their heads of training, making sure you're doing everything properly, but also telling them the negatives. Mm-hmm. So and it sucks because sometimes that the player actually takes that and feeds itself with it, or it just pushes them away from the game. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just too much sometimes. But yeah, I've dealt with both sides.
Yeah, you're the youngest one here, so it would probably be the freshest for you, being like parented and coached and a player at the same time. I mean, for me I kind of have a different background in it, and actually we should probably mention that as well. I mean, all of us kind of came from a different avenue in terms of how we got into it. For me, I didn't have tennis parents. I didn't have parents who, like, my mom played tennis in high school, but we've all met people who played a sport in high school, but they don't call themselves, like, they're not getting, the Raiders aren't giving them a second look right now. Like, yeah, you played high school football, but like you put it down and went to college, and you know you got your associates. Like, you're not a football player. So like my mom played high school tennis, and my dad, I don't think my dad did, but they did.
My dad hacked around in college a little bit. Like my mom didn't start playing till after I started playing.
Yeah, my like nobody got me into tennis. As far as like early on, I didn't pick up a racket until right before my senior year of high school. But like I played like all the other sports before that, so I had like good athletic foundation. But when I started playing tennis, I just really got into it. So I was playing 7 to 10 hours a day because as a senior, I mean, obviously in the summer I had other stuff going on, so I had a lot more free time. But as a senior, I actually got done school every day at 12 o'clock. So from like 12:30, I'd go
till it got dark.
Exactly, because the tennis courts were like relatively close. So
Did you have a wall?
There was a wall near. I had to go to 2 different tennis courts, but there was a wall. So I would go to the wall, hit on the wall. But at the court that I went to, they kind of came in shifts. So like early in the morning, there was the old guys that were out there. They had their fold-up chairs. They play double, sit down, have a few drinks, talk back and forth. So I played with them. I learned the touch game and the angles. And obviously, as a young kid, I didn't want to be rude, so I wasn't coming out trying to like slap the ball. And I also wasn't that good, but they let me play with them. So I learned that part. And then around like 12 o'clock, a different group of people would show up. I'd still be there. Then at like 3 or 4, the younger kids would show up, and I'd be playing with them. So I'd be kind of rotating through crops. So like my endurance got better. My court sense got better because I had to kind of keep changing the way I played depending on who was there.
So you just acquired different skills along the way.
Right.
No, that's awesome.
But at the same time, when I realized that I actually really enjoyed it, and again, like a lot of people, I feel like certain people don't have a respect for how difficult it actually is because A, it's not a contact sport. It's not one of the mainstream sports. But me thinking it was easy at first, I enjoyed playing, but I thought it was easy. So I was like, I wonder if I could play for college. So I just, in my head, I'm like, there are people that have been playing since they were like 5, 6, 7 years old. So I have no concept of how good these people are. So I'm just practicing with like this pie in the sky goal of like, if I practice really hard to offset how long they've been playing, I'll be good enough to at least go to college. And I feel like I was like Cinderella story though, because like I actually ended up getting a full scholarship to go play after.
Well, and I mean, to be honest, you are kind of a Cinderella story.
I'm not, but
It's crazy.
I mean, I find that as somebody who, I was a good enough athlete. I mean, I can do most sports, fairly well casually. But like, I started playing when I was 7, and I think from the time I played my first tournament when I was 9, like the only day I didn't play from then until certainly I was after my sophomore year at the University of Florida, like the only day I didn't play tennis was Christmas. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I was on the court like ridiculous hours, and I knew how hard it was, and I played against, I played against Becker, I played against Agassi, I played against Sampras, Paul Verhoes, and I know how good you have to be to play at that level, and then for you to come out, as a senior in high school and pick it up that quickly is absolutely remarkable.
Yeah, I got an award for not losing a set the whole season.
Yo, that's crazy.
Yeah, my team got eliminated 2-3 in the championship. I won my match. Our doubles teams lost and one of our singles players lost, so we didn't continue on. But it was definitely interesting to be like that good. And again, I didn't have a basis of comparison, so anybody that I saw, I just assumed they were way better than me. So I was like, I got to get at least that good. And then I would beat them, and then I'd be like, all right, next person that I see that's good, I got to get at least that good. And I had no concept of it. The first time I actually had a concept of what like really, really good was, I went to what is now Legacy. I went to Arthur Ashe, and I saw young kids that were slapping, like slapping. And I went there and actually ended up meeting, because the other thing I didn't mention, I never had an official coach until I got to college.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, 'cause I mean, I don't really, there's like, there are high school coaches that are actually coaches, and there are high school coaches that are like the gym teachers.
Oh, I know.
And that's what we had.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
I didn't have an actual coach until I got to college. The summer of me, because even during the summer I hadn't signed to anywhere, and I just put my name on a recruiting website, and I trained at what used to be Arthur Ashe. I met my coach, who is Cha. Yeah, I met Cha, and he would give me tips here and there, but I wasn't a well-off kid. I didn't have a ton of money, and paying private coaches is expensive. So what he would do is he's go and say, "Hey, I need a hitter while I'm doing this lesson. All right, I don't have anything for you right now, so go out and hit on the wall, go play on the court, see if there's anybody that can play with you." I would just hang out there, and anybody that was free, I'd go try and ball with them. But now I had a better crop of players to chase after.
Right, and I think, in terms of being successful as a player or being able to compete well, it gets back to that idea of adaptability. And I remember I played when I was, I think 10, I played David Pollock, who ended up being Jimmy Connor's hitting partner and played very successfully for UNC. But he was like ranked top 10 in the US in the 12s. And he went out there first seed, like one of my first tournaments was like down at Arrowhead. And he absolutely crushed me. And was super nice about it, and said, "Oh, you just
here's his beat down.
This is your second or third tournament,
Just give you this little.
But I took that match. To kind of what you're talking about, I took that match and I looked at what he did, and I'm like, all right, well, how do I absorb that and make myself able to do more of what he does? How do I integrate what I see in another player? Oh, they have a better serve than I do. How do I make my serve like that? They recover faster than I do. How do I make my recovery better? So looking at the people that you're exposed to and starting to, integrate what you see, what you want to have, that then your athletic ability allowed you the ability to do that. But the desire, for players, we ask a particular student, oh, well, how'd your tournament go? I played well.
Yeah.
Well, you lost that last match. What did they do better? Well, it's very vague.
And then the parent comes over and they're like, well, I'll tell you what happened.
But it's not even that, like, I want to know, like, oh, like, Susie Q just had this insanely good, backhand cross court. I want to go out and I want to make my backhand cross court like that.
Why do you feel like that's missing, though? Because it's been so rare that I've had that conversation.
Because I think, and again, I think there was certainly more of that when I was growing up, or that mentality, but I think
with me and like the players that I hung around,
I think it's maybe societal, where we're in this. I think hopefully the tail end of this, like every participant gets a medal or a trophy,
yeah,
and there's no real desire to go out and acquire anything for yourself, because everything's done for you for these kids. You don't see a lot of,
I call it the Google era, where like you remember growing up when you had to do homework and you had to like go to the library and find the book,
the good old Encyclopedia Britannica.
But think about that, like you had to go to the library, find the book, take it to the copier, copy the pages you needed, take it home, read it, use it. Now it's like half the projects these kids get, they can Google it on their phone in between class and have all the answers they need. So like, because information is so readily available, nobody really has a desire to acquire information.
I agree.
So as a player, like for me, like I said, I didn't know about tennis academies. I didn't know really about private coaching, to be honest. Like every sport that I had done before tennis had an organized coach. This is the coach of the basketball team. This is the coach of the soccer team. I didn't have a private coach, and I didn't even know about it until I went to train at the academy, and even then I didn't have a coach. I just knew that they were a thing. So me having to kind of source all my information on my own. I watched the tennis channel. I had my favorite players. I would look at them in slow motion and go and say, all right, so they're doing this. I didn't even know the rules of tennis. Like I'm watching an ATP match and I'm hearing somebody say let, and I'm like, the hell does that mean? Mm-hmm. So then watching it enough, you start figuring stuff out. But like, I feel like everybody now is so used to having the answer given to them. And if they get it wrong, then it's your fault.
Yeah. I've noticed that. I've definitely noticed that. Definitely, like when I actually had a small group that my group that I kind of like grew up playing with and stuff like that, and I know Pete was saying how he lost, and he was looking at the match and was just absorbing everything, just studying what he did wrong, what he was doing better, and stuff like that. My small group, I felt like we all did that. We all did that. We all pushed each other. We all kind of like analyzed each other and tried to help each other out. And I feel like, yeah, definitely it's lost. I definitely think a lot of players aren't as driven, and maybe not as coachable either.
I agree with that too. In this area, one thing that I noticed, I think me and you had a conversation off camera about it, was everybody now is kind of waiting for their shot rather than taking their shot.
Yeah.
So like when Joel was a teenager playing high school in this area, there was a legitimately high level of competition, and every high school is actually worth watching. Like you would want to go find out who won between Joel and this kid, or who won between this school and this school, but as Joel's group became juniors and seniors, the group under them wasn't training to take their spot. They were waiting for that spot to open up. Yeah. So if I've been number 2 my whole life and Joel's been number 1, but I'm a sophomore and Joel's a junior, when he leaves, that number 1 spot is mine. So rather than like me training.
I wanted that spot when I wanted that spot when I was a freshman or a sophomore, not just because the seniors left.
Exactly. Like I wanted, because the other thing is, that's a training up for me as the way I develop. That's a training opportunity that I'm not going to get once he's gone. So if me and Joel went to the same school and he's way better than me, and I'm number 2, when he's gone, who am I training with? So I need to get to the point where I'm able to compete with him or beat him before he walks out the door, so that I could say that I'm actually the number 1 player. But I feel like once your group of players left, because you guys were all juniors and seniors at the same time, every school's level went down except for like one, because they had one sophomore who was still there, and then everybody who kind of inherited the number 1 spot was a second tier. And I think that happened like 2 more times. Like the counting now is a lot weaker. They have a couple of players that are good, but like all the schools used to be deep down to like the first doubles team, and now it's like you either have like a number 1 and 2 or a 1 or nobody. And pretty soon, like even those guys are gonna be gone. So I mean, like,
so who's coming up, man? Who's gonna take it? Who wants to take it?
But that's the problem. Like nobody wants to take the spot, which brings me to my original point of the kids want it given to them. So when you're training them to play the right way, if it doesn't work, it's your fault. And if you train them to do things the right way and it works, then they did it. You know what I'm saying? Where like they take credit for they don't take credit for the failures. And I feel like, and Peter, you're the only parent here, so you could probably speak to it better than I could, but I feel like this generation of parents is very quick to give praise to their kids and give critique to those that train their kids, rather than the other way around, where like, thank you so much for helping my son achieve this. It's your fault that my son failed to do these things. And instead of it being like, how can we work together to accomplish this part, it's you didn't do your job.
Right. I mean, but I think that's true. I mean, across the board, whether it's athletically, it's scholastically. If there's a problem between the student and the teacher, the coach, I mean, when I was growing up, my mom would say, well, what did you do to piss the coach off? Nowadays, there's a flurry of emails to the person who works above the coach saying, what did you do to upset the child? So, I mean, that's back to part of what we were saying about the culture of what, how these children are growing up and what their parents, and again, I think everybody, I mean, your children are special, but some people have an overinflated opinion of what their children's abilities are, or the levels at which their children are trying. And as both a coach and a parent, I can look at kids who are not my kids and look at how they're working and say, well, that's not really working that hard. Right. Whereas their parents look at the same situation and go, oh, little Jimmy or Susie is working their keister off.
Right. What kills me, I mean, and we've seen it here, is like the kid who comes once a week for like a session and then they come back the next year at the exam.
And they think they should have moved up.
Right. Exactly. And they're like, well, I've been playing for 3 years. No, you've been playing for about 16 hours, dude. Like realistically. In total. Like if you look at it, like you got a kid who comes to class for 8 weeks for 1 hour, puts their racket down, comes back the next year. That's 16 hours of tennis, because they didn't practice between it. And then, but the thing is, then we'll get a call or an email on like, when is my kid moving up? And we're like,
but we have a sheet that has a list of
the people that were older moved on, so now I'm like the high school situation, now I'm taking their place. Exactly. Not because I deserve it, because of what I'm doing or what I've learned or how I've performed, but just because, it's like this lemming falls over the cliff and now I step up to take their place. There's no, it's not a meritocracy, it's just
And it's not the time period you've been in that class. It's always the skill levels.
Right. Hey guys, Coach Will here. Wanted to apologize for cutting the video short, but ran into some technical issues. This was the first one that we did together. So we're going to cut the video right there. We actually got into a bunch of other conversations, and you guys will get to see more of that stuff in the coming weeks. But thanks for watching the HARDCOURT Podcast, and we will catch you guys later.